Okay, so we're gonna make a little beef stroganoff tonight, and one of the things, I've tried a number of different things to make beef stroganoff more interesting. I think one of the things that happens, in my opinion, with beef stroganoff, it's a little too bland. So there's a couple key things that you have to go through when you make beef stroganoff. One, unless you're gonna get a filet, I think a beef chuck is a much better cut of meat. You can see if you come in here, there's a better marbling in that. A lot of people will call for sirloin, which I think sirloin is too tough, and when you cook it for a period of time, it doesn't get that much better. Where a chuck cut has a lot more marbling, and if you could cook it for, let's say, 2 hours, I don't want it to cook it so much that the meat just starts to fall apart, because I don't like it that way, but I like it enough so it's super tender. So that's one, get the chuck if you can't get filet. Second thing is, I'm going to show you how I do this later. I use Anaheim chilies in mine, and I puree them and I put them towards the end. So that's a key ingredient. I also use, like I always do, some red wine, because it's always great. You got beef broth, tomato paste, onions, and mushrooms. And I'm going to show you how I cook those, and I cook it in layers. So first, what I end up doing is getting the meat going, and I get the meat going. I put it on a cast iron skillet, get it going, put it in some olive oil, and get it to a nice sear and set it aside. Then what I'll do is I'll take the onions and I'll deglaze that pan with some onions, tomato paste, and red wine. So we'll show you that in the next step. But let me get going with the meat and get going with the onions and mushrooms. Like I mentioned, I do like to make this beef stroganoff with Anaheim chilies, and one way I do that, rather than just buy the chilies in a jar, what I'll do is I'll make my own chilies and I puree them. So the first step of that process is to broil them, because you want, as you can see there, I've got it around tin foil, and I just put it in the broiler for probably about 5 minutes aside, just to get a char on the skin, and then I'll show you how you take the skin off these Anaheim chilies. Pretty slick little way to do that. While I'm doing that, I'm also cooking this meat in batches on a cast iron skillet. You can see, put a little salt and pepper on there, so we got a nice salt and pepper flavor going in that, and I got the Anaheim chilies going on at the same time. The next layer of flavor I like to add that's a little different than maybe some people will do is, what I'll do in a cast iron skillet is I'll take some butter and melt that down and put some garlic in there. And what I do from there is I will put the mushrooms in there and cook the mushrooms down a little bit in there to try to put some flavor in those mushrooms before they go into the beef stroganoff. After I get a char going on both sides in the broiler with those Anaheim chilies, I take them out, and then I put them in a bowl, and I'll put plastic wrap over the top. That humidity will then create that opportunity for that skin to just really fall off here at the end, and I'll show you that. But pretty slick little way to make your own Anaheim chilies. Now, in order to deglaze the pan that the beef was cooking in, I'll take those chopped and diced onions and go ahead and put that in there. You can see the beef has been all charred up and set aside. Now we're deglazing the pan with some onions, and then we're also, remember we had that mushrooms going? You can see there's some nice butter flavor going in with those mushrooms. Again, this is all about cooking in layers. Cooking in layers, that's what we do. While I am deglazing this, I added some garlic there and some salt and pepper, and you can see those onions starting to get a brown flavor. That's really from the beef that was left behind in that skillet, so that'll give it another level of flavor. All right, so we're still deglazing these onions, and the next, one of the latter steps before I start putting this together, I do put tomato paste in there, in that pan. So start cooking those onions with that tomato paste. Get the tomato paste, there's about 2 tablespoons right in there of the tomato paste. And we'll get that going a little, get a little char on that tomato paste. You know, cook it over real low heat. Get that going, incorporate that into the onions. and then I'll put some wine in there. So I'll show you that here in a minute. So you can see I've incorporated that tomato paste in there. And now it's time to put a little red wine in there. So I use about a cup to a cup and a half of red wine and get a nice little simmer. You can see if you get close here how that deep, you just say that deep flavor in there, and the smell from that is off the charts. So just cook that for a few minutes, and I'll do that and then put the beef broth at the end. Again, you're gonna about a cup and a half of red wine. Good, it doesn't have to be your expensive red wine. Get that cooked down just a bit, and let's put some beef broth in it. So the chilies have been in this bowl for probably about 10 minutes cooling. And again, I just had the plastic rack right over the top. So you can just take them out and you can see what they look like after they're done. And just take a look. It just peels right off in a big old sheet. And talk about flavor versus buying out of the can. One, it's cheaper. Two, the flavor, 10 times the flavor. You can see it just came right off. Okay, back to you can see I've reduced the wine a little bit with that tomato paste, and I did put probably almost 2 cups of wine in there. I can't help myself, it makes it so good. And then I add a couple cups of beef broth right at this point. Again, I want to kind of get all those flavors cooking together first before I put it all together, and then I'll cook it under real low heat on the cooktop on this cast iron kettle. But we're going to cook this down just a minute or two. Just get all those flavors in together. And then we'll start putting everything together now that we've got most of it cooked. So I take those green chilies and I dice them a little bit, but then I'll put in this little hand blender that I have, and I'll put a little of that onion mixture that I created with that beef broth and wine, just to give it a little more sauce in there. And then I'll just give it a good hand toss for about a minute or two. Just so it's finely chopped. So you can see, if you take a look, it's been all diced up, ready to go. Now I'll put that in as one of the final elements. So as you can see, if you look inside here, we got the meat, and I have that broth mixture that I made, so get that going. Then I have the mushrooms here that I've cooked in that butter and garlic. So you can see some of them have a nice little char on there. So I'll put that in. And a nice flavor from that. Just that alone has got some flavor in it. And then I'll add 1 more cup of beef broth, just to get the meat covered. So now, yeah, just right at 1 cup. And then the last bit of flavor are these Anaheim chilies that I showed you how to make. Again, we just set that in there. And I'm telling you, this will make a world of difference in your flavor, and people won't even know they're eating Anaheim chilies because they're just be a part of the dish. So I'll cook that covered for about 2 hours in this skillet, and you will find this full of amazing flavor at the end here. I just turn it on, set it on real low and slow for about 2 hours, and that's about it. Okay, so here is the final product. It's been cooking for just over 2 hours, really low heat. You can see some depth there. Boy, that meat. So good, so deep. I'm gonna put it on a plate. We're gonna give it a little try here, see what we think. Okay, so this is what it looks like at the end. You can see, look at that beef. That's that chuck beef, and it is so tender. It is so tender. And what I did at the end to finish this off, green onions, just dice those up, and a little Parm cheese right on the top. I did put maybe a quarter cup of sour cream or whipping cream in, just to kind of cut a little bit of the richness of it. But again, this meat, that beef chuck, is so tender. Those layers of flavor, unbelievable. You're gonna love this recipe.